Welcome to the show, everyone. If you enjoy exploring the unknown, you can find full episodes and exclusive content across my YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and all major podcast platforms. If you like what you hear, please be sure to hit that like, follow, and share buttons and leave a review. It helps more than you know, and it keeps the show growing. Now let's get into it. Tonight's guest is Carrie Genzel, and she is an actor, producer, and the creator and host of Echoes of the South, a paranormal storytelling podcast exploring real hauntings and unexplained experiences through a deeply human lens. With credits including Jennifer's Body, Supernatural, and The Walking Dead, she brings both storytelling expertise and lived experiences to the world of the unknown. So let's welcome Carrie in. Hey, Carrie, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. It's an honor.
Paul, it's great to be here. I love jumping on and talking all things spooky when I can. So I'm excited about this chat.
Oh, me too. I know we've already chatted probably 30 minutes prior to this. We probably should have had all that on there because it was great stuff.
But, I know.
No, you came across TikTok. I think I saw you on TikTok. You came across there and I was like, this is perfect. I love the name Echoes of the South. I love the content. I love what you're doing. And I think you're about to release an upcoming podcast, which I'm excited for. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. So Echoes of the South is really diving into all of those stories, legends, and lore, the hauntings, the true crime, all of it of the South. I originally am not from the South. I've lived here now I lived in Atlanta first for about 3.5 years, and then we moved to Macon, Georgia just over 2 years ago. So I'm just really enthralled with all of the stories and the history here. And so that really is what sparked Echoes of the South. And I'll be releasing and launching the podcast probably in about a month. I haven't set the exact date yet, but I'm thinking sometime late May. And I'm really excited. So it's going to be a hybrid. So we're going to have podcast interviews like this, but we're also going to go out there and investigate and talk to historians and talk to detectives and different people, depending on what case we're focused on. So I'm really looking forward to diving into all of that.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what I think it needs to happen more often than not. I mean, you have a lot of podcasters, and I'm not knocking. You have great podcasters, but I like to see the ones that actually go out there and do some of the work rather than sit there. You know, they need to put the boots on the ground. And I was glad to see that you guys are doing that. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I listen to a lot of different podcasts, especially, when I'm on the road and stuff, I love to put them on. And there's a lot of times that I sit there and go, well, that was a really interesting storytelling. You're not bringing anything new to the story. You're just telling me about it, right? Like, I want to know, did you talk to someone? Did you get out there? And certainly with paranormal cases, you got to get out there and boots on the ground. I have such a curiosity about all of this stuff. I'm so fortunate to have Morgan and John who come out and investigate with me because they really are the experts. I've investigated with them for a while. I have a partnership with Visit Macon, and I do a video series called Macon Beyond. You can find that at maconbeyond.com. And we do like historical and tourist locations here in Macon. So we've done like the Hay House and the Big House and 1842 Inn and the Burke Mansion and different locations. And that's more geared towards kind of getting into the history and the architecture. And then we do an investigation and look for, anything that may still be lingering inside. But with Echoes of the South, we're really just rolling up our sleeves. I got a lot of people that came up to me in the last few years and said, well, our house has something that is unexplained. Could you come in? And I'm like, well, we wouldn't really do that for Macon Beyond. Well, I don't know. And then I thought, well, why don't we do that? That's really where Echoes of the South comes in. We've got some interesting things coming up. We're getting ready to do an investigation that's under a heavy renovation. And I had to check with Morgan and John, our investigators, to like, are we okay with going into a location that's like basically down to the studs? But there's just been a lot of activity and negative activity that they felt in that space, in that house. And they want to get that all cleared up before the renovations are done. I haven't seen the photo yet, but she said that they caught a photo where there's a man standing in the room where there was no man. So I'm excited to see that.
Well, yeah. And you know as well as I do that a lot of times during renovations, it tends to kick off activity. Do you think it's something that's happened since renovation started, or was this prior to?
Well, let me tell you, and I have to do, once we get the date set, I'll dive into the history and And I'm big on that. Like we have an incredible library here with archives. So I love to go into their department and their team and really stretch their skills. Cause I'm like, all right, here's what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
they'll pull up all or archives, microfiche and like family photos. It's really amazing, but it helps a lot. Again, this is old land. This is an area of Macon that I've heard a lot of stories about in terms of activity that's centered around the land. So again, we might be going in and there's layers of things happening. She hadn't said this was her mother's home. So she said that she didn't recall if there was anything really going on, but as she's been renovating this house, they've noticed orbs in photos. They document pictures for the progress of the work, but in these
Sure.
photos, they're actually collecting evidence, which is wild. And there was one person that was working in the home that actually saw what he described was similar to this man that was captured in a photo in another instance. So I'm not quite sure what we're going to be walking into in this case. As I always say, I have experience with the paranormal. I have always felt and seen things ever since I was very young, and my parents really wouldn't talk to me about it. So it wasn't until that onslaught of like the paranormal shows that started coming out where I'm like, wait a minute, this is what I see, or this is what I experience, that I really kind of dove right in. And as an actor, I've been involved in some paranormal type projects, but that's not real. I'm trying to think. Well, did have, and it wasn't a scary project. It was like a Hallmark movie. I had a spirit follow me home from set, which was completely my fault. But we were shooting there's a suburb of Vancouver called Coquitlam, and there's an old decommissioned asylum called Riverview. And anyone that's shot in Vancouver has probably shot there, and everyone has ghost stories from Riverview. But I had a couple of scenes off, and I went up to the fourth floor, which is notorious for having activity. That was the floor where they had, the beds, and they slept there and everything. But there was also like solitary confinement, like these really creepy rooms with no windows, and just didn't look fun at all. And as I was wandering around, I did feel like there were people walking with me. I didn't feel quite alone, but I didn't see anything. And then I ran downstairs and I finished out my day and I drove home. And when I wrapped that project, I was, shooting up in Vancouver. I went back to Los Angeles and I started noticing some strange activity in my house. And this was a house that had activity, and I was pretty well versed on, what kind of came through there. But this was weird. It felt male. It felt very nervous and like not stable. I would notice it kind of hovering around my door to my bedroom, which also was a little unnerving.
Yeah.
And so I called a friend, as one does, who's sensitive. And I was like, hey, so I've been noticing this weird activity in the house. And he's like, all right, let me kind of tap in and see what's going on. And he calls me back and he goes, Carrie, where have you been? And I was like, well, I was shooting. I'm already feeling guilty because I feel like, oh. He's like, yeah, you have a hitchhiker. And I was like, what? What's a hitchhiker? So, I have so many people in my life who work in this field and in this world. And so they've all given me these tips and tricks and things. I've always been told over and over again, before you leave a haunted location, to like make sure you tell what's there, that it does not have permission to attach itself or come with you. It has to stay there and what have you. Well, leaving Riverview, which is just bursting with activity, I just drove home like a fool and didn't do that. So somebody came home with me.
Wow.
Yeah. So we sent it back.
That's good. So when you talked about it hovering around your door, did you kind of see it? Was it like a shadow person type thing? Or
It
you
felt,
just could feel it?
yeah, it wasn't anything where I saw, because I've seen full bodied apparitions. I've seen, shadow figures. It wasn't really anything like that. I could just kind of sense that there was like this energy around the door, like almost like it was like peeking in, like it was nervous, like it was, wasn't supposed to be there. It's like it knew, like it wasn't supposed to be there. So in that instance, I didn't really see it. I felt it more than anything. And I can kind of tap in that it felt male and it felt, just not not good. Not that it was bad or evil, but it just felt it was probably a patient. So it was somebody who was not,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I know we were talking earlier about the guy that I saw at the old mental hospital in Alabama and had the machete and everything. But we did go back there, and probably the week later, and we were able to do a proper, whatever a proper investigation means. We spent some time there, but
Yeah.
I think after a couple of times of going there, I started noticing things at my own house, like you were talking about a hitchhiker type thing. I was seeing something bob around a corner or just around a door real quick out of the corner of my eye. And I know you don't want to acknowledge it. You don't want to give it, that you're afraid. You don't want to give it any kind of fear that can work upon. But I just kept
Right.
noticing this thing and it was
It's
creeping me out.
that. It's that thing where you're just like somebody's peeking around the corner. Like there's something
Yeah.
there. And then
Really quick.
yeah. Well, here's one thing that I've really learned in working with different people in the paranormal field is that we the living have a lot more power than we think, and I've definitely used that and realized that in my life because if number of years ago when we were living in Atlanta, there was something in our home that was trying to scare me and it did manifest in front of me. And knowing the information that I have, and I really do trust the people in my life who have given me advice and talked to me about all of this. I looked right at it and I actually smiled at it and I shook my head and just said, no, like that. And it disappeared.
Wow.
And I went, holy cow. Right. And that's just an instance where, it shows you just how much power we have of like, you're not doing this in my home. You are not welcome here. Um, Now it didn't go away after that. Let me tell you, I actually had to call a dear friend of mine who's a shaman, and we had to do a lot of different things to get that out. But it didn't try to threaten me after
Mm.
that because it would, the manifestation was one thing. There was another time that I was walking alone and I could feel it walking right behind me, like almost like it was, threatening in a way, like kind of like how a bully would be like, kind of hovering behind you. And I
Yeah.
like turned around and I'm like, no, like I had to, really stand my ground. But we went through a lot of different things to finally get that out. But
Wow.
it just is a reminder to myself always of how powerful we are and to not let the fear take over because I think sometimes that can happen if something unexpected happens, especially in your home, which is supposed to be your safe place, right?
Right.
It can be jarring and unnerving, but you've got to stand your ground just like you would with a human being. You've got to stand your ground and be like, you're not welcome here. You're trespassing. You need to
Sure.
go. My experience is that with the exception of this one spirit, when things have come into my home and I've asked them to leave, to my knowledge, they've left. I haven't seen them again or heard them again. And I think in most cases that'll happen, but you get some that, have other ideas. And so
Yeah.
that's when you call in the experts, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I would have to do the same. So I want to just switch gear or slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
Can we talk about some of your earlier experiences when you were younger? Is that okay? Or just
Yeah,
how
for sure.
you turned into this investigator, actor, the whole thing. Can we kind of go through that a little bit?
Yeah, I think like when I think back to when I first started noticing things, which my mom labeled an imaginary friend, right? But when I think about it, it wasn't so imaginary.
Right.
I just said, "Oh, I guess that's what it is." And then, later as an adult when I thought back to what I was experiencing, I'm like, why would I didn't make that up. That wasn't imaginary. But we were living in a house and in my bedroom was on a different floor than my brother and my parents. And I started to notice at night there was a person there. There was like somebody there that I would talk to. And it wasn't frightening to me. I would interact with it. And I don't know who it is or was. And that's kind of how it started. And I've just throughout my life, I've seen things, felt things. I don't know, I don't really have a label for it. It's just, I've just experienced different things.
Right.
And I've gone into people's homes and seen, someone sitting on the stairs or, somebody in the hall or whatever and be like, oh, what did your grandfather look like? For a while, I didn't talk about it a lot because sometimes people are uncomfortable about it. But it just always really fascinated me. And being an actor and being a storyteller, it's always the story that I'm interested in of, well, who is that? Why are they there? Why am I seeing this person? Why are they coming to me? I always want to know. I want to know the story. Later in my career, I was working with a producer, and he had done some reality television and unscripted TV. So I was like, "Hey, have you ever done like a paranormal project?" And he didn't even really believe in it, which was really fun, actually. And I started, working on and developing different paranormal projects and taking those to, the cable networks at the time, and, Sci-Fi Channel and Discovery and all Learning
Mhm.
Channel and all those. And so for a while, I kind of got labeled the ghost girl, because I'd always bring in these
Wow.
different paranormal projects. So I got to meet a lot of different people, from demonologists to witches to pagan exorcists to shaman, different investigators that use different techniques. I mean, it was really, really interesting to meet so many different people and learn a lot from them. Echoes of the South is, well, I guess, Macon beyond, but Echoes of the South is really the first time that I'm actually in front of the camera investigating, because I've always been in the dark, as a producer, which is a whole other thing. First of all, have my hats off to all those producers out there that do paranormal content, because you're standing in the dark along with the team, but there's cameras pointed at them, and you're like trying to figure out what's going on and what's happening, and work. And I have to tell you, like, I don't know if it was just me, but when we were producing content and pitch material and so forth, there were a lot of times the spirits would mess with me. And I remember shooting, we were in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery in a mausoleum, and they had all the powers off. We had the run of the place from like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. or something like that. It was just really, really cool. And we're in this mausoleum, so there's no power. There's just us in there. And there's like somebody like whispering in my ear. And I'm like, go over there. The team's over there. Stop messing with me. So yeah, there's a lot that, yeah, I'm working. I'm working.
Well, maybe they know maybe you're like an antenna, you're more receptive. Maybe they can sense that or feel that, so they gravitate toward you. You ever think about
Well,
that?
I do. Yeah, no, that, I mean, I know that that is true to an extent. I don't know how much my antenna is giving off, but I know definitely from working with Morgan Lynn, who's our psychic medium. She talks about that a lot, about how different places or different people can light up, and that they know that you can see and hear them. So I certainly don't have the level of expertise and the gifts that she has, but I have it somewhat. So maybe there's that, hey, I know you can hear me. Stop ignoring me. I know you can hear me.
Yeah. You're like Whoopi
Yeah.
Goldberg on Ghost,
Yeah, that's what it feels.
or,
Exactly.
or maybe not that bad.
Oh my gosh. It's pretty wild. It's funny because people are very fascinated by it, but there's people that get really scared. They're like, doesn't it scare you? I'm like, listen, I'm with two pros. Like, I'm really just there to I'm going to go along for the ride. And I just kind of talk about what I'm experiencing or seeing. I'm really relying on them to do what they do best, and communicate and guide us to where we need to go. So pressure is not on me. I feel like I'm just kind of the tourist in
Yeah.
there.
Well, I'm glad you are with professionals, because they'll tell you when maybe it's time to back out, or let's go, something's not right, or it could get
Yeah.
more dangerous. There could be like more of maybe like a oppression or a possession type deal that's going on
Oh,
there,
for sure.
more evil. So I'm glad you have that
Well,
going
there's
for you.
definitely those darker entities. I know, I haven't experienced that in our investigation so far. But Morgan does really keep us safe. I mean, we're not necessarily trying to document going up against the worst of the worst. That doesn't mean that's not going to happen. I mean, this property I was telling you about with the renovations, I know that there's a lot of energy in the land. And so, because there's a lot going on in that
Yeah.
area, in that neighborhood that I keep hearing about. So I feel like, that's one of the ones where I really just, I tell John about it more so beforehand. Morgan likes to go in clean and not know anything. But if there's
Sure.
something I'm concerned about, John and Morgan are married. So they're partners in investigating and in life. So that really helps a lot to say, hey, John, just a heads up, just in case there's anything he needs to say to her to kind of, so she has an idea of what she's walking into. But she'll start tapping into things, even not knowing where we're going. She a lot of times gets information. She receives information on the way to the location, even though she doesn't know where she's going, which is really wild.
It is. It's like, I know you've heard of the ether or the Akashic record
Yeah.
or anything. I guess a newer term would be quantum physics or quantum
Yeah.
entanglement.
Yeah.
I think a lot of we're all connected. Everything's connected. I think there's a lot of things that just float around. If you are just, if you're going to be open enough to listen to it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're right. The South, or at least, I don't know if you've done this anywhere else, but the South is very haunted and they seem to have a lot of history. I don't know if it's because maybe more superstitious in the area, because I grew up in the South, grew up in
Yeah.
Alabama.
Okay.
I've heard stories my entire life.
Yeah.
But I've also been all over the country and some of the world. You don't tend to hear a lot of this stuff anywhere else. But when you get to the South, it's a thing.
It's a
And I love
thing.
it.
It's a part of it. It's just ingrained in the culture. I just found out a couple of months ago why the ceiling on our porch is painted blue.
Yeah.
Hate blue. I had
Paint blue.
never heard of that before. I just thought it was a style because I noticed it on other houses. I noted it. It's pretty. I was like, oh, they just like to paint because it looks like the sky. It's really pretty. So, it's those things today that you see and you don't, when you're not from here, you didn't grow up here, you're like, why is that like that? There's a lot of superstition and I love getting into all those of where does that come from? Where does it originate from? Right.
I know. Oh, so have you been to Savannah yet? Probably. I mean,
I actually have not. No, I know.
It's
I have not.
It's full of that color, by the way.
Blue, the haint blue.
Oh, they're
It
very
needs to
big.
be. It needs to be full. The whole city should be haint blue.
Yeah, it should. I love Savannah.
Yeah, I definitely will get there for sure. There's so many stories that we want to tell, and Savannah just has so many stories. But I'm shocked. I'm surprised at how many stories there are here in Macon, and why I love telling the stories here is they're not really told. They haven't really been very vocal about their local stories and legends and lore. So it's fun to put a spotlight on those and just sort of investigate and tell those stories in my own backyard.
No, that's very cool. I know the town probably appreciates it.
Well, some do, some don't. There's people that still are like, why do you want to tell those stories? But it's fascinating to me. And I think in working with Visit Macon, with Macon Beyond, like there's a whole, there's tourism around it. There's people that do love to travel to different places and go explore those haunted locations. And so it's fun for me to really highlight those and say, hey, if you haven't been here, come check this out. Now, what's really interesting from an investigative side is because Macon is not overly investigated. There's a lot of times that we go in and that location has never been formally investigated. And so sometimes it takes a while for the spirits that are there to kind of understand what we're trying to do or get comfortable with us, like trust us, because we get a lot of the where they're like, what are they doing? And so that makes Morgan's job a little harder because she's got to really kind of explain to them, why we're there and that it's safe and we're not trying to get rid of them. So, there's a little bit of apprehension sometimes, but it's kind of cool because it's not overly investigated. There's a lot of content that I see online and it's a lot of the same locations over and over and over again. And there's a lot of activity there and that's cool. But I love that we get to kind of walk in fresh to some of these locations and see who's been roaming around in the halls.
Yeah. And if you think about it, and Morgan could probably tell me more about that, but if you go into a place, it's like you said earlier, another human coming into your home, you would be like a little leery of like, what are they doing here? So, just think about if something is still residing there and we come in and we're walking around like we own the place and they're like, what are you doing in my house? It could.
Oh, that happened. Paul, I mean, that happens a lot. And then you also think about different timelines, right? And, we have these really beautiful old historic homes here in Macon, especially downtown. And, first of all, they weren't receiving guests in their private bedrooms, right? And we're wandering around, hey, who's here? Especially if you're encountering a male, they're like, who are these two bossy broads walking into my bedroom asking me all these personal questions?
Yeah, don't do that in the South.
That's right. So it's very, very different. There's an inn here called 1842, and Morgan actually was getting a tour by Judge Gresham, who built that as a private home. And then when she got to the gentleman's parlor, there was this no, you're not supposed to be here. You're a lady, right? There was still, so it's very interesting because you have to kind of work through the time of okay, who are we encountering? What timeline are they in? Right. And how are we going to kind of get around that and just get them to trust us to maybe show us around or ask or answer some questions? And it's kind of wild. And going back to what you're saying about the renovations, I mean, same thing, if somebody's in a different timeline or doesn't realize that they've passed, because we encountered that recently, they are not going to be happy that you're ripping the walls out. They're like, what are you doing? Yeah. That's my house. So they're not going to understand. And I think, that's been something that's been really interesting for me as well, that I talk to Morgan a lot about, is the different spirits that we encounter. We encountered a woman recently on an investigation who did not know she was dead. They do. John and Morgan have a code word when they encounter that. And it had never happened on an investigation. And I got so excited that they use the code word that I was like, I actually just posted it this week. Code word is tangerine.
Wow.
Now, the reason why it's such a strange word is that it's not going to come up in investigation, right? But it's, still something real, right?
Yeah.
And if you're in the spirit realm, you're not going to think anything weird about tangerine, but that's what they say. So if she's talking to somebody and she realizes they don't know, she'll just say, oh, tangerine, right? We'll go, oh, well, no, to not say when did you die? Or we're very careful about that, because according to what Morgan tells me, it can be very jarring to a spirit that may not know. And you're like, when did you die?
Yeah.
It kind of rocks their world. So we try to be very sensitive to that. But yeah, it happened twice in 1 week, actually, where we were talking to spirits and they didn't know that they were dead.
That's bizarre. I've got so many questions for you guys. I'm gonna have to I want to get all three of you together and ask 100 questions. But as far as,
oh shoot, just 1 second. I have a rascally rabbit who's getting into trouble. I will be right back.
Oh, no, you're good. You're not kidding. You did have a rabbit down there.
I have this is Dash. He's not a ghost. Isn't he cute?
Oh,
he's
wow.
big. He's a big boy. It's his first podcast.
Hey, Dash, what do you want to talk about?
Oh my gosh. Carrots, kale, parsley. He's such a rat. He lives in our house and he's free roaming and he gets into a lot of shenanigans, and he was getting into something he wasn't supposed to get into. So I had to grab that. Stop that.
No, it's no problem. I was just going to ask, I know you've heard the terms like residual. Oh yeah. Intelligent haunting versus residual haunting.
Yeah.
How much of that do you guys run into? And can you explain, I guess, just and I know I've got thousands of questions, but I know you've heard of the stone tape theory also, where it's just a residual. It's just replaying over and over, and it's just looping. So
right.
How much have you guys run into that?
Well, we haven't run into, I think because we use Morgan's really our guiding, force. And when we go in and investigate, and Morgan's looking to connect with what you would call an intelligent haunting, with a spirit who we can communicate with. If she notices that there's some kind of energy that's on a loop, then she'll call that out, but we won't, there's no point in trying to communicate with it because it won't respond. It's just like an imprint, right?
What kind of fruit is that? She can't say.
That's a cucumber. No, she'll just say, that it's just an imprint or something. Yeah. No, there's no fruit. I love it. That's funny. Banana. So she'll kind of let us know. So she's always looking to tap into, the haunting, the spirits that can communicate with us, because that's really why we're there, is to
Sure.
find out who's there, why they're there, and if they need any help. There's times that we've gone in and we'll always ask if there's anything we can do. And it's interesting what we get back, because sometimes it really seems that they're not really looking to cross over or to move on. They really just want their story told. They want to be heard, just like we do as the living. And then there are times that they do ask for help to cross over, and that's something that Morgan does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering how that worked, because I know here in all over the South, there's, the Civil War was horrible. And I know a few years ago, I was lucky enough to get to, I went in, I don't know if I could, a country singer's home. And my daughter was friends with the caretaker's daughter.
Yeah.
So we got to go in this very famous country singer's home. He was out on tour, but I got to tour the place. It's an old, super old plantation home. But the caretaker said that she routinely sees Union soldiers walking around on the porch, and she even saw like a half apparition of a female inside the house. And
Wow.
she's seen it a couple of times, but they don't recognize her. It's like she sees them, and she's so used to seeing them at this point. She tries to talk, but they just go about their business. They're
Right.
just they're like we were talking about. It's like a residual. I guess they're just looping. But
It's just a loop. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. My parents in their place, and I don't think it's happened recently, but when they first moved in, the woman that had lived there prior to them had passed away, and I believe she had passed in the home. And my dad used to see her walk from the living room into the kitchen, but it was always the same. He said it was like a recording, right? And she
yeah,
never acknowledged he was there or anything. And I guess that one of the things she loved to do was to have like her afternoon tea. And so he said maybe that's what she's doing. It's just the imprint of her walking into the kitchen to make her tea, because that was something that she enjoyed every day. But yeah, I think that in that respect, it does sound like it's more residual, that it's just kind of doing its thing and it's not going to interact with you at all. You're just kind of seeing,
yeah,
like it's like a Xerox, like it's, or a copy. It's almost like I was saying to someone the other day, it's almost like, we all used to have the VHS tapes, and when you'd keep recording over it over time, like it would kind of, deteriorate, the quality would deteriorate. It's kind of reminds me of that. And so that's really interesting as well, but it sounds like there's a lot of activity there. Some of it may be intelligent, some of it may be not.
yeah, yeah. I was telling you about Franklin, Tennessee earlier, and it is they have, you can hear any kind of story you want there. They have both residual and intelligent. I hope you guys can make it up sometime soon.
It'd be fun.
The town's beautiful, but it also has a very rich history, and you could spend a week there and going around to the Carnton plantation, a lot of the old cemeteries there. It's just a beautiful place. You would love it.
Yeah. Oh, I know. We'll definitely try to make it over there. And that's it. I love learning about all of these places and learning the stories of these families. And I think, again, the idea of Echoes of the South is how all of our lives, they echo through time. A lot of those things that happened many years ago are still echoing through this timeline, like nothing really goes away. And to me, it's interesting to investigate and look back and say, well, who were these people and what did they do? And why are some of them still here? Are they just popping in to say hello, or are they stuck? And why are they stuck? Why are they still here? So it's interesting to me. I have that investigative mind. We talked a little about that earlier.
Yeah.
Of like wanting to know why. And then I think also as a mental health advocate, I'm always wondering, like, is there anything we can do to help you? Because the idea of, being stuck in some kind of trauma or dramatic event over and over in a loop is, really, really sad to me. We go through enough of that as we go through our lives without thinking about someone continuously going through that. It's also a reminder, I always say, of like, let all your stuff go now. Don't carry it into the afterlife. And we encounter that a lot of people that are stuck in these traumatic events and they're still reliving it over and over and over again.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I learned everything I know about the paranormal from Supernatural, Sam Dean Winchester. So I know. No, seriously though, there was an episode. I like the show, right? And
Yeah.
I know you were on there also,
Yeah.
and
I did a
um,
few of them. Yeah.
that was very cool. But they would talk about the spirits that would have to loop and loop, or they relive the same thing over. It would drive them mad. But there's just like a lot of their stuff they talk about, it is based in some reality. I mean, whoever the writers were of that show did a lot of deep dive. They did their homework.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff going on in there, but you know,
Yeah, it's so interesting. My brother actually worked on the show. He worked in the visual effects department for several seasons. And there's a story that always makes me laugh. We were at a family wedding, and we're sitting in this church in Vancouver. And my brother's like very dry, his sense of humor. We were sitting at this family wedding, and my brother's looking around this church, and he goes, I think we burnt a nun in this church. And then he well, when they were working,
okay.
when they were working on Supernatural, he's like, I think we burnt a nun in this church. And then he's like, yeah, we did. Now I know he's talking about work,
Yeah.
but the people in front of us like did one of those like where they looked over their shoulder, right? And I had to laugh. So yeah, because he worked in visual effects, so they would have had the actor, the nun, in the church, and then it would have been my brother's job to make it look like she's going up in flames. So I always laugh at that story. But yeah, Sam and Dean. Yeah, I mean, the 2 episodes I did of Supernatural, I wasn't doing really anything supernatural at all. I got to work with 180 tarantulas, and yeah, got killed. And then I had unicorn blood on my face on the other episode. So no, there wasn't. Yeah. Well, there wasn't. No, you know what's really interesting about that? That episode called Just My Imagination is about my daughter having an imaginary friend.
Yeah.
It all ties together, Paul.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So she had an imaginary friend called Sparkle who got murdered.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that the one also with the big teddy bear? Remember
there was a big teddy bear in her room.
Yeah, there was one where there was a haunted or some teddy
bear.
It
wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. It didn't come to life or anything. Like it was just. I just remember there being a teddy bear in the room. But there was like a mermaid, a manicorn, Sparkle, right? And then what else was it? I don't know. It's a great episode. I haven't watched it in a while, but yeah.
Okay. Well, you've done a lot for sure. So are you just into the paranormal, or do you, or I guess to the haunting stuff, or what are your thoughts on anything else out there that's kind of like fringe? Like,
fringe. You know, I have to say, for a long time, I wasn't really focused on any of that. But in the last number of years, maybe it's from moving to the South, which is weird because I'm from the Pacific Northwest originally. So when I tell you what it is that I'm going to say, well, you probably already know. You're like, how did you never get into this? But I really got into Bigfoot.
Yes. Yeah.
Pacific Northwest. How was I so late to the party? Yeah. And I grew up, in Canada, so Sasquatch. But I think it was like during COVID or something, we're all at home. My husband and I started getting into a lot of Bigfoot content, and it became very fascinating to me.
Yeah, I'm into that pretty big down here.
Yeah. Now, we don't have a lot of that here in and around here in Macon, Georgia, but they're definitely Georgia. They're more probably in the north.
Yeah, I haven't heard. You hear a lot of reports in Tennessee, for sure, Gatlinburg area, the Smoky Mountains, the Appalachian Trail. Yeah. Not a lot in Georgia. Alabama's got a few reports. Louisiana's got the Honey Island swamp monster. Mississippi's got its own thing. Florida's got the skunk ape. So Georgia's just got Ghosts, Peaches, and Dash.
That's right. And Dash just terrorizing my office currently. My gosh.
No, yeah, I'm big into the cryptid world, cryptid field.
Well,
I don't know what I think about it.
Yeah.
I'm just like you. I'm curious. I want to know.
What do you know? Like when you have people come on that are talking, that are Bigfoot investigators, what is it they think that? And I'm sure there's a variety of.
Oh yeah.
Different points of view. But I do think, from what I've seen, I'm always like, is it I don't know. It just seems weird. The orbs, like
Yeah.
like there's a lot that goes into it, right? Like, is it interdimensional? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just like
They
anything.
disappear. Like
Yeah,
people
you have
chase them
so
and
many
then all of a
sides.
sudden they're gone. It's odd.
Yeah. No, there's two camps and they fight with each other all the time. There's a
Oh, they
scientific
do.
camp and there's a paranormal camp, and I don't know. I don't know where I'm at with any of it. I
Right.
know I have spoken with some very credible witnesses, and I believe that they saw something.
Right.
I've been I've been out there. I've heard the tree knocks. I've heard the weird howls, the whoops, the screams. I don't know what that stuff is. I'm not going to call it.
Yeah.
I want to see it for myself. So
Right.
it's like I have to see it. I can take up trace evidence. I can cast the footprints, all of that stuff. But until I see it, I'm not gonna. I don't know.
Right. They're
But
very
yeah, they're
elusive
the
if they're out
orbs.
there.
Yeah,
There's a
it's a
lot
lot.
of, there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of strange things. I don't know. To me, it's very fascinating. I don't know that I want to be out in the woods in the middle of the night trying to find one. I'd rather be in a haunted house, I think.
Well, there's a place up here called the Land Between the Lakes, and
Okay.
I was speaking with Natalie Smearman a few weeks ago, who does she does a lot of Bigfoot stuff, but in that area, along with the Bigfoot stuff, there's also several cemeteries. It's very old land, and even Native American land also. But they run the full gamut. They've had orbs, UFOs, Ogmen, Bigfoot. They've had definitely the hauntings, the apparitions. So
Right.
that's a big area, and that's a big area between Kentucky and Tennessee. It's only about two and
Wow.
a half hours from here.
Right.
But I want to go
It's
up
all
there.
very, yeah, the UFO thing too, because that's another thing that seems to be that a lot of times is reported the activity, the Bigfoot and the UFO and the orbs and the whole thing. So I
Yeah.
don't know. It's
Yeah, you mentioned
fascinating.
earlier. Yeah, you mentioned the hitchhiker effect or
Yeah.
hitchhiker that follows people home, and I've kind of been a fan of John Keel, who wrote the Mothman Prophecies. He was like a researcher from the 70s. I don't know if he coined that phrase, but he came up with a lot of that. How that could happen if you're out investigating. It's like almost what you seek, you will definitely find. If you look into it, something's going to start looking back. Was his main thing.
Well,
So
that's a great point because I know there was years ago, I was developing a show that centered around curses. And when I talked to certain people that work in that world, there were times that they wouldn't even want me to go and look at certain websites. Like they would go, what do
yeah,
you want to know? What's the information you want to know? I'm like, well, I just want to know about this cursed object. And they went, no, well, just I'll tell you. Right. And it's
wow,
that whole thing of like what you're looking at is looking back at you. So it's very interesting, I think, in terms of just people who have a curiosity or investigators that we sometimes kind of go into the building kind of like, wow, let's go. Right. But just know that
yeah,
they know you're coming.
yeah, yeah, they do.
Depending on what your intention is and what you're bringing into that space, there might be something very scary or dark looking back at you, right? That's now aware of you. And so, I'm always very aware of that because there is, I have that healthy dose of, curiosity, but I know that if there's anything in my mind that's like, well, should I look that up or should I just ask someone? If I have any kind of doubt about that, I know to sort of check with the people I know that are more well versed in that world because it's true. You can kind of attract. It's like attracts like. So
Yeah, for sure.
there's certain things I'm like I don't really want to be on their radar. But that's
Yeah.
okay. So I'll let someone else tell me about it.
No, that's great advice. There a lot of and we were amateurs too. I mean, we started out doing the same thing everybody else saw on TV. So,
Yeah.
but it's very good advice to, don't do it if you're not trained or if you don't have someone there like you do, like you're fortunate enough to have Morgan and John. So, yeah, I would recommend not doing it at this point because things are ramping up, things are getting more weird. It seems like the veil is kind of thinning and it's just like
Yeah.
I was going to get back to what John Kill, he seemed to think toward the end of his career, and a lot of researchers at this point think that a lot of this stuff is just all connected. Your
Hmm.
your spiritual realm, the ghosts, the fairies, the
Right.
UFOs, the Bigfoot,
The
everything.
fairies, that's a whole thing too that I never
Yeah,
thought about. Elementals, like I
yeah.
don't know a lot about that stuff either. There's someone that I know that has a local business here in Macon that has them in her business. She talks
Hmm.
about it and I'm like, "Wait, what?" So, there's always so much to learn about all this stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's all connected.
Can you mind telling me a little bit about what she's saw or what she's experienced?
I'm hoping she'll let me, go in and investigate, but she's very wary in that she doesn't want to disrupt what's in there because
Yeah.
sometimes they get upset.
Well, yeah.
She has a lot of security footage of orbs and things that there's these things that almost look like centipedes
Okay.
that are somewhat or it's kind of looks like almost like something you'd find in the ocean, right? But
Yeah.
like a centipede long that will be floating around in the shop after she leaves and different things. And I don't know a lot about the fairies. She's talked about it and I'm always like I need to get into this more cuz I don't really know a lot about it. I
Yeah.
just yeah, have you had any experience with that or have any knowledge around the fairies?
No, I
I
just
know
read
that
a
you
lot
don't
of.
want to make them mad.
No, you don't. I just read a lot of stupid books as a kid, so it's I wasn't normal. No, I mean the fae folk, the fairies, the elementals. I mean the
Yeah.
trickster spirits. I mean it could be
Yeah.
anything. A lot of times, just researching a lot of stuff. A lot of things appear to people as what they want to see. It's almost like a tulpa, like
Yep.
or whatever. The general consensus is: what are we going to see tonight? What do we want to see? What do we want to have manifest? Right.
Right.
So a lot of times they may see fairies, but the other person may see a gray alien, or the other person may
Oh, wow.
see a dog man or something like that. But that's the trickster element, the supernatural, spiritual woo side of things. But they're not for sure, of course. But yeah, you don't want to make them mad.
But that I know from what I've heard. I do wanna look into it. I'm hoping at some point, even if she feels like they don't want us to come in and mess around with, shop, it would be interesting just to talk to her about it
Yeah.
a little
I
bit
know
more.
when you mentioned the spiral things,
Yeah.
I've seen that before, and there was someone years ago, I forget his name, but they're called rods. So look up
Okay.
rods,
Okay.
RODS. They think it was mainly just an artifact of the camera. Like you catch them on camera if your exposure rate is not high enough to catch an actual bug. This is what
Okay.
happens. You'll see a
Oh, it'll
spiraling effect.
okay.
They'll zip around like little, almost like they're fish underwater.
Right.
But
Right.
there's another camp that says no, these are actual spirits. So
She does
everybody
have a
can.
lot going on in that shop.
Yeah, you have.
So, and again, and there was things that went prior to her opening that shop, there were things going on in that business. And then, again, it's the layers, it's the land,
Yeah.
it's things, could be something that happened in a neighboring business or, it can be so many things, but she definitely has a lot going on in there. And it's more of a metaphysical type of shop. So there's a lot of also energy that
Oh,
gets
okay.
brought in, right?
Okay.
And that's another thing, like, I think going back to intention, it's for us, we all investigate with the same intention, and so we know walking in, I feel very secure in that, we're all walking in with the same intention because you do have to be careful. These teams that, sometimes we see on whether it's television or on YouTube or what have you, where they're provoking or they're trying to
Yeah.
conjure is really dangerous.
Yeah.
And even for teams like us that go in with the right intention, and again, because it's not overly investigated here, the locations aren't overly investigated here in Macon, but in other locations, what Morgan and John have talked to me is they've investigated all over the country, is you don't know what another team is left behind because maybe
Wow.
they conjured something or opened a portal or what have
Mm.
you, didn't close it, and now you're walking in thinking, oh, we're just doing a run of the mill, investigation. And meanwhile, all kinds of things are coming through. So
I never
that's
thought
the
about
thing
that.
too. That's happened to Morgan and John, where it was actually a television show that had been there prior to them. And they were the next team into the location. And it was a mess, she said, like, because they had gone in and ruffled the feathers, right? And provoked and made fun of one of the spirits and what had happened to the spirit and so forth. And so when they came in, it was a very, hostile environment. And so if you're not experienced and you're new, or you're like, oh, I just want to try this out and I got some ghost hunting equipment, you might be walking into something that's way above your pay grade.
Yeah, for sure. I don't blame you at all. I'm not into the provoking or any of that stuff. I mean, it's just if they're real, if they're spirits, they're real people with real feelings, real. You want to be as respectful and nice as you possibly can.
I think so. I think, as you said, like we're walking into their space. And so I think that's really tricky when it's these big locations that everyone wants to investigate. There's this constant reaching out of like, is anybody there? Is that you in the corner? And I got to think as a spirit, I'd be like, let's go away. You keep bugging us. But I do think that it is about respect. These are people that had lives before us, that a lot of them ended in a tragic way or had very difficult lives. And, it's being mindful to that and reaching out to them in a human way of like, who are you? And is there anything we can do for you? I understand. I think for us, it's not about collecting evidence. It's not about proving is anything there. We know there's things there. There's things around us all the time. It makes me laugh always when people are like, oh, I'm not going in there. It's haunted. Like, little do you know, there's spirits around us all the time. Doesn't matter if you're in that house or your house.
It doesn't matter if you turn off the lights and you're in there at night. Everybody has to film at night, and
they're around us right now. So it's I think, like you said, it's a lot of it has to do with intent and being respectful of the location and who came before us. And with the other stuff that's not human, that's a whole other. But, that's a whole other thing. I don't typically seek out that kind of stuff. I posted the other day about Ouija boards, which is something I've never really messed with because I don't know what I'm doing. Right. So I'm not going to mess with that.
I've only heard bad things. Yeah, I wouldn't mess with those either.
I've talked to too many people that work in this world that have talked about how people get into trouble with them, even kids, because they don't realize what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they think they're just having fun, and they may be saying things, again, it goes to intention. They may be saying things that they don't realize carry weight. Right?
Yeah.
That it's not just a game from Fisher Price, right? Yeah. And then they don't close the session, right? They just put the game away and throw it in the closet. And then there's this door open.
Yeah.
But even that, like John and Morgan were saying, you don't know if there's people that buy them at antique shops, right? Or flea markets, right? You don't know what that was used for, right? You can get in all kinds of trouble that way.
You can. And even objects that have attachments to them, like if you bring something home from a flea shop, like an old chest or an old bed or old table, whatever, you never know what's attached. I wonder if have you had any attachments, or have you heard of any attachments, like with the actual like furniture and stuff?
I haven't come across that. Morgan and John probably have, and I know that they had a doll. You've got to have John and Morgan on.
I was just thinking that.
They had a doll that had a spirit attached to it. And I will let them tell the story because they know it better than I do. And then I have some friends in Texas that have all kinds of haunted items, that some of which I would never deal with. I also have another couple of friends in Texas who, I know a lot of people that collect haunted items.
Yeah, I wouldn't want any of them. But I was just thinking while you were talking about them, I need to have all three of you guys on here. I would love to. Anytime they're ready. I mean,
I'll let them know. It'll be really fun. They're to me, they're wonderful. And Morgan is just that she's done this for decades. She's had pretty much every experience, including, aliens and like everything, where she's connected with this and that. And, there's so much experience.
Yeah.
I'm in great hands when we go in, and I feel always very secure, and I always defer to her. If she walks into a room and says no, I turn around and walk back out.
Yeah, that's good.
And she'll have different reasons for doing that. But again, I use a lot of my instinct as well. If I walk in somewhere and don't feel comfortable, I'm not going to keep pushing because there's
Yeah.
likely something there that's like, I'm not interested.
No,
Leave.
that sixth sense is there for a reason. I mean, I don't know who put it there or why or how, but it definitely is there. And,
Yeah.
people, you need to listen to it
Yeah, for sure.
for sure.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'm not into the whole fear factor thing of like to go in anyway and sit by yourself with a blindfold. Like,
No. No, I mean, there's something to that, but you will attract the wrong things, the things that feed on fear. They want you to be afraid. They want,
absolutely.
so yeah, I don't know. I really like the way you guys approach everything. And I like the fact that you mentioned earlier that Morgan doesn't like to know anything about the property. And that's huge. That's really big. And that's good on her for just going in and feeling what she feels.
It's really wild, because I'll always do research and I'll send it to John in case he wants to look at it. And if there's, like I said, if there's anything at all where I'm like, he might want to give her whatever, in whatever way he's going to deliver that message, but a heads up about something that might be sensitive or, in terms of our safety and her safety. So she's not just opening herself up and all of a sudden going, oh boy, I'll let him know. But yeah, she comes in and that's so fun for me too. Cause I'm always, I always arrive before they do and, talk to the homeowner or property manager or so forth. I'm always the anticipation of them arriving. I'm always like, did you get anything in the car? Because often she does. She'll get very vivid things, very specific, where she got to a location one time and she described to a T an individual that used to live in that house, right? Right down to the mutton chops and the shaggy hair and the whatever. She's like, I don't know who this is, but this is who I kept seeing. And I'm like, there's a picture of him right here. Wow. In this house. So it's really wild to me. Just it's very fascinating to me how she works and just how gifted she is in terms of communicating. And that helps us so much because our greatest instrument is Morgan, and we really do use her to guide us through as well. It's really exciting to see for me, just visually and of course on camera, when the equipment starts to react, right? Because you're getting another level of evidence of we have Morgan who's experiencing it and verbalizing what she's seeing and hearing. We've got the equipment beeping or getting an EVP or the XLS camera mapping something or whatever. And then it's, what our experience is as well. So when you're getting those different levels of experience, one of the best cases that we had where we got those multi different layers of evidence was we were through Visit Macon and Macon Beyond, we're able to go in and investigate the Hay House in Macon, Georgia, which is a incredible, stunning property. And they do not allow teams to come in and investigate. And they get asked all the time. But they do have a really great Legends and Lore tour that you can take several. I think they're about to do it again. So for those people listening, if you're in the Macon area or drivable, definitely go get that ticket and go to the Legends and Lore tour. But it is incredible. I mean, they call it the Palace of the South. It's an incredible, huge, huge house with a ton of legends and lore. And we were up in an area that would have been more so for the staff, maybe the children. So definitely not an area that people would be received as guests. And we walked into a room and Morgan immediately said, there's about 5 spirits in here and they're very guarded. They're protecting something. And I could kind of sense that in the space that, and when your chest kind of tightens up a little, you're like, you feel, just like in life when you're talking to someone who may be very guarded, and sometimes I can feel that energy of like, oh, I don't want to tell you. That's kind of how it felt. And we're sitting and we're talking and she's trying to get around that energy, right? To see what it is that's going on. And they're sensing that. And sometimes I just kind of know things like to talk about something. And so I started talking about, my journey with mental health and that I found that when I'm able to be vulnerable with people, that it connects me to another person and we're able to have a conversation. And I'm talking about this, right, in real time. And all of a sudden I see in my eye, I see this dark orb literally go like that and pull away towards Morgan. And before I even have a chance to say anything, Morgan goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm really dizzy," and like grabs the wall, right? I said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I saw like an orb or something dark like come at me." I said, I don't, it was weird. And she's like, "That was the woman. The woman was running at you and saying, 'Stop talking. Don't say that. Stop saying it.'"
Whoa. Jeez.
And so John was down a few floors down. So he had no idea this had happened. And we didn't say anything to him. And he's running around with his equipment, right? He later, in that same floor across the hall, picks up a dark orb on his camera that looks exactly like what I saw. And to me, that's just the best case scenario, right? So you have what your experience was and what you describe, and then you actually pick up that same evidence on a piece of equipment, right? Which is an investigator's dream. It doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
And that's in the episode. You can find that at maconbeyond.com in the Hay House episode. It was just really wild. So I did apologize before I left because I was rude for speaking about things I shouldn't be talking about. And it was very funny because we recently went back to the Hay House and I walked in that room and I'm like, "Hi, I will mind my manners today." But, it goes to show like it's really interesting when you step into these old properties and, those people are stuck in that time period. Or we encountered people that worked there and they were nervous that they were going to get in trouble for talking to us because they're not working. Right.
Yeah. Wow.
It's just really, we encountered a little boy who was hiding behind the door and he wanted to come in, but he was worried he was going to get in trouble, right, by talking to us. And we caught like a heat signature that would have been about the height of a 7-8-year-old boy, like by the door, which is incredible, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't always work that way where it all comes together, but it's exciting when it does. And with all the technology we have now, it's so cool. Like the things that you can pick up and just back up what you're experiencing.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to ask you about what do you guys use? I know we have a lot of technology nowadays, but do you ever pull out the old like dowsing rods or the pendulum or anything like old school stuff?
I know, I love all that stuff. We haven't used that in the investigations with them. I know that they've talked about it, so I'm sure we will moving forward. Now that we're doing Echoes of the South, we're doing more investigations and going into different types of properties and so forth. So depending on where we are.
Yeah.
And I talked to John about it because he's our tech guy. He's our lead investigator, but he's the one with all the equipment, and he just loves to take out all the toys and work with them. But we sort of talked about how when you're going into these historical locations and you're bringing like modern day, REM pods and things that they probably didn't even see electronics, right? It might be very foreign to them that something's beeping and lights are going off. And, we've talked about that of like, is it sometimes very valuable to sort of bring out the old school, like something maybe they were familiar with or something they're more comfortable with to interact with.
Like a trigger object, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's weird. You do get those like spirits that there was a little girl we had encountered recently, and she was very enamored with John has like this new REM pod that has even more lights and it talks and it like does all this stuff. And she was just really enamored with it, right? And especially when she figured out that she could trigger certain colors on it because it has different colors of lights. So it was really interesting to see that happen where she would make a certain color light up. So you get those spirits, even the adult ones that have a curiosity as to what the equipment is. But I think sometimes too, they think that it might hurt them or it might make them go away, or they just don't understand it at all, depending on what time period they're from.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking I'll tell you a really quick story and then I'll let you go. But I was working a private investigation case up northern Tennessee around Red Boiling Springs. And there's a place there called the Thomas House Hotel.
Yeah.
It's been on a lot of the shows. You may have heard of it.
I've definitely seen it, investigated.
And it was the only hotel within miles that I could stay at the night. So I said, heck yeah, I'm going to stay there. So I got there and I was the only person there in the entire place. Well, I take the caretaker was there and the front clerk. So when you walk in, it is straight out of, I keep talking about Scooby-Doo, but I love Scooby-Doo. But
I do too.
It was straight out of the, I mean, it was perfect. When you walk in, it's very old. It's very antiqued. It's big. It's perfect. You know, that's the first word I said when I walked in. I was like, this is perfect. So
Right.
anyway, the caretaker came, knocked on my door like it. I was trying to get some sleep, like at 9 or 10 o'clock. Said, "Hey, Mr. Herring, you want to go do a ghost hunt?" And I was like, "Sure." So we got out, and it was just he and I in the whole building. Didn't see a thing, didn't hear anything, but it's, you know, you could feel the vibe, right? 3 o'clock the next morning. I got to get up early. I got to get to my surveillance spot. But around 3 o'clock, I was awakened by the terrible stench of a dead animal.
Wow.
It's horrible. It woke me up. And I didn't react right away, but I know I was awake, but I didn't open my eyes. I was just like, what is this? What's going on? You know, sometimes you don't want to, like I said, you don't want to like just jump into fear mode. And I just sat there a minute and just tried to stay calm. It went away. I mean, most smells linger, especially like some kind of dead animal or whatever.
Yeah.
It'll just linger, but it just completely went away. I said, all right. I fell back asleep. 5 o'clock, I guess, it woke me up again. The same smell, same stench. It was awful. So I sat up, turned on the light, and sat there just a few minutes and just like looking around. It's like, what is going on? I didn't hear a thing, but the smell just dissipated like really quickly. And I walked out, or I was checking out anyway early that morning, and she said, the front clerk came in, and I said, is there anything going on here I need to know about? She said, no. She said, why? What happened? And I said, well, there was the oddest smell coming out of my room. And she said, oh, okay. She said, yeah, we've heard that before. And that was it. But, you know, I definitely want to go back there. I think you guys definitely should want to go there. But
yeah, that's definitely on the list.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, Paul, you got to put that. So on our website, echoesofthesouth.com, we have an interactive map where you can submit your story, right?
Okay.
And so we're starting to build this collection of stories. So you'll be able to look on the map and click on the different pins and add your story.
Yeah.
The reason why I wanted that on the website is I just think it's really fascinating. There's, you know, especially when you're not from a certain area, or you're like, is it just me? Or is there something weird with this building? Or there's people that are afraid to tell their story, because some people submit them anonymously, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't want people thinking they're weird or whatever the case may be. So I'd love to see people start pinning their stories for that hotel and kind of getting an idea of all the different stories. I would think that if you smell a bad animal, that's not a good one. That's not, it's not, that to me is not something positive.
No, it didn't feel good.
No.
But like I said, I didn't want to react to it.
Right. No, that's it.
It was terrible. It was bad.
Wow. But what an incredible opportunity that you walked into where there's no one else there. Yeah. I wouldn't have slept all night. I've been like, let's go. Let's run around.
I don't know.
Years ago, I stayed with a friend of mine on the Queen Mary. And this was years ago. This was like, when would this have been? Maybe 2000, 2001. It was at a time when they didn't have the ghost tour, and the staff was told not to talk about it, because we tried to get everyone to talk about it, right? Because you would hear stories, right? And there were only a few staff members that would tell us stuff. Mm-hmm. One was a night kind of janitor guy who said that, you know, there's in the main part of the ship, there's these beautiful sort of Art Deco elevator doors that close that are like, they're beautiful. And he said, it's not uncommon for me to stand here in, 2, 3 in the morning, doing maintenance, doing things. And somebody will step behind me and I'll see the reflection of somebody kind of stepping behind me, and I'll turn around to, of course, greet them, and there's nobody there. Right. Whoa. I'm like, that's the stuff I love.
Yeah.
But we had all kinds of experience. So we at one point found the service elevator. It was, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And I was like, let's just see where we go. Yeah. And we went down to the floors that were closed and wandered around, and we heard a lot of movement, a lot of things moving around, clanging, different things. There were definitely, I felt a lot of energy, just movement, right? Up and down the stairs and just different things that we did make it down to the engine room and heard some, heard movement in there, which I know there's a lot of reported activity in the engine room. But it was really fascinating. Now they fully embrace it, but then it was like pulling teeth trying to get them to share stories about what they were encountering. And we did in our room, and I don't recall what room we were in, but when we got back from running amok in the ship, and we did get nailed by security at one point and played dumb, like, geez, we got turned around. I don't know where we are. How do we get back to the bar? But there was an imprint on the bed. It looked like somebody had sat there. And nobody, of course, was in our room. So there was that. But it looked like someone had kind of sat on the end of the bed. Maybe someone was waiting for us to come back. But yeah, so that was really fun. But it's funny it's good when they talk about what's going on. It's hard when you're trying to pry the information out of them.
Oh yeah, it is. Now, do you have a bucket list of places you'd love to go investigate?
Gosh,
it's a long list. I'm sure
it's a long list. I've learned certainly in when I've developed different projects, I know that I'm always led to where I'm supposed to be. So it can seem very daunting of how am I going to tell this story, or how am I going to get to all the people I need to get this project launched? But I know that it's just about starting. And when I start, I'm going to continue to be directed to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And that's kind of how I look at it. There's certain places here in town that I do want to dive into, but I know that certainly once we launch, I know that that's all just going to start to naturally unravel, of the different locations or people that come forward or people tied to those places. But there's definitely those ones. I think that, with Echoes of the South, I really just want to get into those stories that aren't being told, that are new to people, and to discover what's there. I think that there's so many great creators and content creators out there that are investigating and have been, pumping out some incredible evidence. And I want to get to some news stories. I want to discover new places and get access to places that aren't necessarily investigated to tell those stories. Yeah.
I bet you will. You'll get there. And I'm excited. So I tell you what, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and what's coming up for you, and we can kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, definitely. So Echoes of the South, the podcast, will be launching in May. I haven't set the exact date yet, but so it's going to be a hybrid podcast. We're gonna do this. I'm going to be interviewing people and talking to people, but we're going to get out there and investigate. We're going to talk to some folks. We're going to talk to historians and detectives, and oh my gosh, we're going to get into it. We're going on some adventures together. And they can find all the stuff at echoesofthesouth.com. We've got our social media up. So we're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all the places. And I'm very active on there. And I love getting people's comments. If you want to add your story to the interactive map, you can go to echoesofthesouth.com. And if you have a location that you would like us to investigate, there is an investigation request form on echoesofthesouth.com as well.
Perfect. And I'll have all of those in the links in the description. So
great.
They should be able to click on it and get right to you. But Carrie, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope to have you back on soon, and especially with all three of you guys. That would be.
Oh, I know. We got to get the whole team together and really get into these investigations, and we can dive into things a little further.
Oh, I would love it. Like I said, I have 1,000 questions, but I won't bore you with that tonight. So, but we'll do it very soon. But thank you again, Carrie.
Paul, thank you so much, and stay safe out there, and report back any great findings that you come across.
I will, for sure. All right, thanks guys for hanging out with us tonight. And like I said, I'll have all of Carrie's links in the description below. Please reach out to her. And as far as my stuff, you know where to find me. I'm on all the platforms, the podcast platforms, Facebook, any social media, basically. So thanks guys, and let's keep the hunt continuing.